Hello, and welcome to the OUTLIER Podcast, the podcast for everyone who is interested in building better homes. My name is Anthony, and I am the founder and lead designer of OUTLIER, and I'm passionate about creating beautiful and high-performing homes. I sit down regularly to chat with industry experts to help educate Australians about the potential of creating healthy, comfortable, and energy-efficient homes. Whether you are looking to build your forever home, renovate your existing house, or simply eager to learn more, tune in every month wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you join us on this journey. I have been very fortunate with the journey of this podcast to chat with many experts and knowledgeable people. As new people come to the podcast every week, we want to take all the highlights and helpful information from previous discussions to provide them to you to assist you with your own high-performance home journey.
In terms of the performance, how do you actually measure all of these different things, that performance factors that you look at?
Yeah, well, there's lots and lots of different tests that windows have to go through. So there's an Australian standard, which is the most basic thing that every window has to be tested for. So it's AS2047. Any window that's being sold here in Australia needs to comply with that, or at least be tested to the equivalent, although there's not much around that's actually equivalent. And that tests a few things. So there's actually 5 tests. So the first test looks at structural performance. So it actually measures the structural member of the window. So if you think of a window that's, let's say, 1,200 high by 1,800 wide, and we have one mullion or one vertical piece down the middle, what they do is measure the deflection of that mullion. So they put the window into a test rig and they pump the pressure up, and it just measures how far that deflects at different pressures. So that actually then says, well, here's where I can use my window around Australia, because we have different wind loads on different sites. So, a window in Melbourne, as an example, you can't necessarily use in somewhere like Cairns that's cyclonic, and so forth. So it tests that. Yeah. So that's the first test. The second test is operational force. So for a sliding door, as an example, there's a measurement, a maximum force to firstly get that door to start rolling and then to continue it to roll. So that's measured as well. The next test is and we haven't mentioned this one yet, but water penetration. So ever seen a window leak before?
More than a few occasions.
Yeah. So they've got to have a minimum performance of, they've got to be able to handle 150 pascals. So within the test rig, they put the pressure up to that 150 and they spray water at a particular amount over the face of the window, and it's got to not leak, not have any uncontrolled water coming inside the window for a period of time. And obviously they then keep pumping the pressure up and see how far the window can go. So you can have windows, so standard and the minimum's 150 pascals, but there's windows around that do 300, 400, 500, 600 pascals without leaking. But they're obviously very different systems, one to the other. The fifth thing that they actually test for AS2047 is an ultimate wind pressure, basically. So ultimate limit state wind pressure. So on each site, through other standards, on each site around Australia, there will be the serviceability pressure. That's the first one we spoke about, so measuring the deflection. The last one is that no matter what comes, you don't want the window to collapse. So they actually pump the pressure right up and make sure the window doesn't fail. But then we've got other... sorry, I didn't mention, that was only 4. One of those tests is also air infiltration, so they actually measure how much air comes out. But there's other things that we have to test for too. So acoustic performance. You can test for how a window performs acoustically. So they basically have a wall that doesn't transfer any sound, put a window in the middle of it, put sound on one side and measure what's coming through the other side in the most basic form. And that'll give you an RW value. So you can ask all your window suppliers for an RW value of their systems. There's lots and lots of acoustic tested products. Then bushfire's another one. So
Mm.
AS 3959 is the bushfire standard. So there's prescriptive measures in that standard for windows. So you can follow those. But once you start to get up to the higher bell levels, like 29 and 40, beyond it, when you go beyond that to FZ, there's minimal
Can't have
products that
windows.
do that. Yeah. But the prescriptive provisions really, it's very hard to get a window to look any good, like with the screening and everything with those prescriptive provisions. So there's a 1530.8.1 and point 2 that are actually a physical test for windows for bushfires.
Yeah.
So you put a window in a rig and then they burn it and it's got to last, and they measure the temperature coming through and make sure no smoke's coming through and all that sort of stuff. So really tough tests, and those tests are $30,000 to $40,000 a test. So that's why some companies don't do it. It's a lot of money, and I think there's only 2, maybe 3 places in Australia that actually do those tests.
Yeah.
But you'll find that most of the bigger system suppliers, so UPVC suppliers, aluminium, some of the bigger timber window companies have actually tested products certainly up to Bell 40. And so it takes away those screening things that you have to do in the prescriptive provisions. So you still get a pretty normal looking and functioning window. And there's only a couple, maybe one window system that's passed the FZ test, and that was Barhammer windows in Ballarat. But that was a pretty special window, I can tell you that. It's the massive heat that they put them through.
Yeah.
So there's those bushfire tests as well. And then there's fire testing as well. But for the fire tests where they've got to last so long, it's generally steel windows that have had those sorts of tests, not your normal residential or commercial windows. So there's lots of testing. And I didn't mention energy performance. So energy performance, we follow the Australian Fenestration Rating Council procedures and protocols, and it's actually a simulation. It's not a test, but it's based on the American AFRC system, where they've done hundreds of thousands of tests. So the software that's been created, it's so close to actual performance that we can now simulate. So all windows in Australia have to be simulated to those AFRC protocols.
And further to that, Gary, does it mean that it's voluntary to then ensure that your product, from window suppliers' products, are tested as built?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what you can get and what sometimes you see is that a product's been tested, but the manufacturer is not actually making those windows as per the test. So it's maybe not relevant, but you don't know that because the company's still got a test to show you. So the only thing we really have here in Australia to make sure that the stuff being made is the same as the stuff that was tested is the Australian Glass and Window Association have a NATA third-party accreditation scheme. So what they do, so members, and you don't have to do it, it's voluntary to be a member, but what you have to do is you have to be audited every year when you're a part of the association, a member of that scheme. So an independent guy comes in, looks at what was tested and all the paperwork, all the different components of the window, and then looks at what that manufacturer is manufacturing and makes sure it's the same.
Yeah, so for people who are looking to buy or build a house and get windows for their house, that's something that they could look for in a supplier, that they are part of this voluntary scheme to actually know that the windows are properly tested.
So all the system suppliers, all their products are tested. So you've got to ask for AS 2047 test reports, and they need to provide them as a supplier of windows here. Or if you want that extra comfort that you're getting what you think you're getting, you could jump onto the Window and Glass Association website, and there's a listing of all the members there. So they're all a part of the third-party accreditation scheme.
Yeah.
There's also a mandatory labelling requirement, which is part of the building code. So every window sold here in Australia, every window and door, as in sliding doors and so forth, should have a label on it with the structural performance and the water penetration resistance.
But, what are your thoughts on single glazing in Australia?
Look, it fulfilled a purpose because single glazing keeps the wind out, it keeps the rain out. But as soon as we started moving to thermally improving the building envelope, and we started off, in the building code, you had to put ceiling insulation in. That was the first move, and you saw a massive upturn on how houses performed. Then it was all the walls, and we looked at under the floor and slabs and so forth. But we still haven't done this, but what we didn't do is when you've got a building envelope that's performing really well, how's it going to perform really well when you've got poor performing windows? So you've got all these thermal wounds around the building envelope. So single glazing has run its course, in my opinion. No point in building a energy efficient home and actually leaving holes everywhere.
Yeah.
Is double glazing now, obviously you feel that should be the standard? Is that something that you feel will just continue to just evolve as well in Australia?
I think it will evolve, and I know from an industry point of view, there was a push to have you've got a minimum requirement for ceilings and walls for insulation. There's no minimum requirement for windows. It just, here's what falls out. Like, say, you do your first rate report or NatHERS report, whatever it is, and whatever you can get away with the windows, then it's okay. Well, it's really silly because I'll keep saying the terminology of thermal wounds. You're leaving a thermal wound. Anyone that's building a home that goes into any window company and actually has some sort of input into the windows that they're getting, if they come in with a plan, and I've seen stuff where, in a big living area, you might have 8 windows and 3 of them are double glazed because that got you the 6-star or 5-star or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And you say to the owner, well, that's good to have those 3 there. See these other 5, they're just letting all the performance out anyway. So what would you like to do? Well, they say it every time. We'll just double glaze it. Yeah.
I know that in some of the early discussions around how we're going to navigate to get to 7 stars in the National Construction Code for our energy rating, that windows were the number one way to achieve that as a singular sort of item or approach. So that double glazing, it's certainly, and particularly the type of frame as well, but I won't get bogged down in that. But implementing that in was probably the one way that we could actually get to that 7-star. So
if you look at what New Zealand did, and you talk to anyone about New Zealand and the building requirements there, and they go, "Oh, double glazing is mandatory." That's not actually what they did. What they did was set a minimum performance.
Yeah.
And if you could do a single glaze thing that performed like that, we'll go ahead and use it. But it's known and proven scientifically that there isn't one that can do it. Yeah. And so, as an industry, we're probably we don't mind going to 7-star from 6-star, but we're disappointed that for that one item in the building envelope, they won't set a minimum performance. It's like they don't want to go from single to double glazed.
Yeah. I'm really glad you've talked about that, Gary, because that's a big thing for people to understand as well, is that there isn't a performance standard set for windows. And to be honest, I wasn't aware of that myself. I actually thought that was a part of the calculation of, say, NatHERS that needed to. But you're right, there isn't one now. I reflect on looking at the National Construction Code. There isn't one in there, is there? So
no.
That really needs to be something that we look at.
So triple glazing. Well, it just once again lists the performance. I spoke about, double glazed UPVC with U values of around, 1.6 to 1.9 with double glazing, soft coat low E. If you start to do double low E, triple glazed products, you can get down around 1 U value. So it's a good improvement. Is it needed here at the moment? I'd much rather see us get rid of single glazing and move to double glazing first. There are people that buy triple glazing, the passive house movement here in Australia, people that are going for accredited passive house. depending on the climate zone, but they're using triple glazed. Some of the really big mansions that are being built, and people care about what they're putting in. Lots of triple glaze there, even though it's only a very small part of the market. Cost wise, and I can only talk from Ultimate Windows' point of view. Cost wise, it's about 30% extra on top of double glazed. And you get your performance down to a U value of about 1.
Thank you for listening to the Outlier Podcast. You can find helpful links and contact information regarding this episode in our show notes and on our website, outlierstudio.com.au/podcast. If you like our show, please leave a review and make sure you subscribe to never miss a new episode. If you have further questions for us or would want to share some additional feedback, please feel free to DM us on Instagram or Facebook. Until next time on the Outlier Podcast.